Yeah, so the main thing is that I think the Open Documentation Academy is it's still early days, but things seem to be going really well. We've had a few more successfully completed contributions, and we've got lots of people working on tasks. We've added quite a few more tasks over the last week or two. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but something that we really want to emphasize and work on is that, while of course at the moment the technical authors are all at Canonical and a lot of the tasks, nearly all the tasks, are for Canonical projects, that we really want this to be open for any other projects to get involved with, or any other technical authors, regardless of their background. I know it's probably a bit difficult at the moment when everything's Canonical, but we're trying hard to contact other open source projects, ask them to sponsor and suggest tasks that other people can work on, and then the technical authors who are involved in the academy can help see those tasks through to completion, just as we are doing with the tasks that we've created as well. We'd love it if the task list became this huge, diverse, reflected the open source ecosystem in its diversity, in all the projects and all of the things that people can get involved with, so that no matter what your interest, you can find something to work on that's documentation related and see it through to completion, and upgrade your skills and your kind of CV. And I know that people are already doing that, and that's amazing. I think we're all really pleased with the way things are going, although we've got to keep up this momentum, which is part of the reason why we keep doing these office hours every week. And thanks for attending. Yeah, so for this office hours, it's a long weekend for a lot of people on holiday, so I didn't want to make this kind of a serious thing, but I was going to do a quick demo of I've got a huge list of open source text editors that I've used. I'm not very good at them, but one of the aspects that I enjoy about writing and documentation is that you get to play with all of these things and look at the different ways that people interpret the ideas of text editing. I know that there's 16 or 17 technical authors at Canonical, and we all almost use a completely different text editor with a completely different configuration. So there is no one solution. But at least being aware of some of the options and some of the new ideas behind text editing, or some of the very old ideas that are still relevant in text editing, may give you some ideas yourself. And we were just talking before the recording. So I use Vim a lot of the time. Hey, Nick. But there's an aspect to using. It's not so much that I find Vim really effective at text editing. It's that I like learning about things while I'm doing something else at the same time. And something like Vim helps you learn, like how to remember how to use split panels, for example, or if you type colon and term, you can open up a terminal in a different panel in Vim so that you can type the commands that you're actually documenting. This is all on the command line. And so there's that aspect of documentation that I like, not actually doing my job, but learning something else that I might find useful outside of it. So I have got a list, and I've tried to install them on my not Ubuntu machine, as somebody mentioned last time I did this. But I'll share the screen if I can. Let me see if that works. Okay, this is actually Plasma 6. I think the KD folks have done an amazing job with Plasma 6. I've just upgraded to it, and it looks really beautiful. Nothing taking away from GNOME; they're doing an amazing job as well. And so I was going to. These are my personal kind of choices of text editor. I don't really use any of them in too much depth. Sometimes I play with them, but just to kind of give you an idea. And in fact, just talking to Robert before we started recording, KDE's kind of default text editor is called Kate, and it's a really fantastic text editor. It's been around for a long time. It's got amazing language support and syntax highlighting. It's got a plugin system. It's got configurable key bindings so that you can configure the editing environment to be the same as whatever you're used to, even if that's Emacs or Vim. And if you use a KDE or Qt-based desktop, then it's also really well integrated. I'll open a file. I mean, this is a markdown file in the Open Documentation Academy repository, actually. I apologize for the dark theme, which might make it a bit difficult, but some of the things I like about it is the highlighting. Obviously, it's automatically recognized that it's markdown. It shows it down here in the bottom right. It shows things like the continuation of the line here from the previous line, the line numbers when there isn't a carriage return or line feed. And it's a really quick editor to work in as well. Something that it might sound a bit of a joke, but I can notice the latency when I type and when the characters arrive. So Kate is really quick. And if I save this, and this it's also really well integrated with Git. So this is in the Open Documentation Academy repository. You can see that it's detected that I've already changed 2 lines from, I've modified that from what was already the default repository. So I'm not going to go into these in any too much detail. I haven't used Kate for quite some time, but I know you can split the view. You've got a tabbed view up here to start new documents. And it's a really great option as a text editor. It's one of the best kind of open source text editing environments, I think. So to be fair, I think I've got Geany installed, which is kind of the GNOME equivalent. Oh, yeah. So it'll look a lot better on a default GNOME desktop, but it's kind of the GTK GNOME equivalent of Kate. Does many of the same things, beautiful syntax highlighting. You can see here that I'm actually looking at some source code, but if maybe open up the markdown file, let's have a look. Always with these, the theming for the syntax highlighting is configurable. This is obviously defaulted to a bright theme for the text, which works well for me actually. Sometimes, especially as you get older, your eyes can't handle the contrast of reverse text, and sometimes this works well, and all of these things are configurable. Like Kate, it's got tab view, you can split views, it's got the syntax highlighting, it's got the Git integration, and it's another great choice if you're using GNOME. And these things are installed by default as well, even whether you're using GNOME or Ubuntu desktop or whether a KD desktop. So they're really great places to start. They understand Markdown, which is all you need really, but it's all flat text. It's not like a word processor like Google Docs or a LibreOffice, where that's quite a different thing. And I think there's obviously a place for those tools in technical writing, and we know a lot of people who use them to produce technical documentation, but the vast majority of us use just flat text, Markdown, or restructured text if we happen to be working with Sphinx. Excuse me. Something else I wanted to mention, another tool that I have used for writing before is called FocusWriter, which is a Qt-based. It's more like a word processor, I suppose, but it still saves everything as Markdown. But this is FocusWriter, and I guess, as you can see, the thing that it does really well is that it's distraction-free, which means the UI keeps away from everything that you do. Let me just open up a file. Interestingly, it doesn't have Markdown. So, I haven't got the dictionary installed, so it's actually highlighting everything as a spelling mistake. But if I put this as full screen, that's all you see. All you see is the editing environment, and this is great if you don't want to be distracted by the internet. And here's me working. You can obviously change the themes. It comes with some themes. I don't like the ones with weird backgrounds, but maybe you do if this is how you want to kind of work. But the fact is, there's no room for browser or for Twitter or X or Telegram or any other kind of chat. And these kind of distraction-free environments are called focus modes for text editors that support it. And FocusWriter is really one of the best, open source and based on Qt. I really recommend it. if you have to write to word count or you're worried about all that kind of stuff, it shows all that as well, which some writers need to do. They were the kind of graphical. I was just looking at my list. Another commonly used editor is VS Code or VS Codium, which is the open source version without the Microsoft stuff. Telemetry usually. They're great, powerful IDEs, but often can be really intimidating if you've not used a development environment before. They do have Markdown support and they have excellent Git support. And with VS Code, it does an awful lot of detection for you. It will detect the environment that you're working in. So if you happen to be working in a project that uses Docker, it'll install Docker and install all the plugins to help you interact with that. But it's a very ambitious, big project. And I couldn't get it to build in this ARM64 version of the Arch that I'm using here, so I can't demo it. But another graphical editor that I couldn't demo, but also luckily has a web interface, is PanWriter. This is the web interface, but it's open source. You can download the binaries and run them on your distribution or Mac OS or Windows. And the nice thing about PanWriter, there's quite a few of these. They're kind of based on Electron, which is basically a way of running websites as apps locally or hosted on the internet, is that it has this preview on the right. So you write in Markdown on the left, and you see a preview of what the Markdown will look like if you publish it, exactly as we would actually publish our docs for some of our big products like the Snapcraft stuff or Maz or Juju. All of that is written in Markdown. And when you're editing, you can see how it will look on the side. So things like headings and images and lists. You can see that I'm writing in Markdown on the left here, and we get real-time rendering of that on the right, which is really useful. It's the same actually in I don't know if I'm logged into Discord here. I shouldn't do this live, but if you edit documentation for Snapcraft or for Maz or Juju, all of the documentation there is hosted in Discourse, the open source forum software. And in fact, if you read any of the contributing guidelines to those sets of documentation, you'll see that the documentation is published directly from the forum. So you can go into the forum and edit any of those pages, and those changes are reflected live. And in fact, anybody can when you've passed a certain kind of trust level on Discourse. That's the motivation behind using Discourse in that way, that anybody can contribute and write documentation for themselves. And if you do edit the Markdown in Discourse, this is the kind of view that you get. It is helpful to see the output, because this is how people on the right are going to consume your text. Excuse me. So they were the kind of graphical ones. Then I've just got a few, without going into the Emacs and Vim world, there is a few command line tools that I think are worth looking at. Of course, there's Vim and Emacs, and we will revisit those because we use those a lot. But the one, especially on Ubuntu, that's always installed is Nano, and Nano is actually a great text editor. What's nice about Nano is you don't need to know anything about the world of command line text editing, because this panel at the bottom tells you all of the keys that you need to know to really be able to interact with it or get further help. Whereas if you load up something like Vim, it's a bit of a joke, but you can't see how to save a file, and you don't know how to quit a file unless you know how Vim works, or Emacs. Nano doesn't have that problem because you can see what the shortcuts are. You can see it's Control and X to exit and Control and O to write out any changes to the file. And there's no, it's not modal, which means there's no editing mode and no command mode. You can just type in, is me typing, and that's it's a text editor. It's as simple as it gets, but it's a really nice way to edit on the command line. It's always installed, and if you happen to be editing documents on some server or even from your phone, it works well. And it's probably ideal for most people. Something similar, if you wanted, is a really great little editor called Micro. I've just installed this. If you want syntax highlighting in particular, It's very similar to Nano. It's kind of a halfway house in that you can see the shortcuts at the bottom. It's very quick, and it's actually smaller than Nano to install, but it's not often installed by default. But I have used this quite a bit. And then something a bit different that I wanted to show. This is actually the last one I wanted to have. If I can just quit. I can never. Is Helix. So I mentioned modes. If I'll just load up Vim. I'll just load up Vim briefly. What I mean by this is in Vim, by default, when you type, nothing happens. I've actually gone to. You have to type I to go into insert mode, and then you can enter text. And then, well, you can do Control-C or Escape to take you out of that insert mode. And now I'm in command mode. So if I press colon, then I can type, like I mentioned earlier on, opening up a terminal, you can type commands to do things, or split the view. This is the difference. This is like there are two different modes. In fact, there are several different modes in Vim. There's a visual mode as well. And the editor I wanted to show you next is called Helix, and it's modal, but the really clever thing about this, and I think this is the way a lot of text editors are going, and there are additions for this, is you can have multiple cursors. Now, this initially seems really bizarre, because you're used to, so here's the cursor. You're used to there being just one cursor, and this is where you type. It's been this way since computers started editing text, with Ed even. But it can be useful to have more than one cursor, especially if you're doing a search and replace in a document, or you're making similar edits across lots of different lines. And when you start to get more kind of thoughtful or advanced in the way that you do text processing, like with Vim or Emacs, where you start entering commands to change words, multiple cursors allows you to do this in a very visual way. Now, I don't know that much. I have yet to fully explore it, but what's really interesting, I know that if I press Shift and C in Helix, I get another cursor. Let me create some space. So now I've got 3 cursors, and if I type, I now have 3 cursors. I'm typing that 3 times. Now, the great thing is that Helix supports many of Vim's features. So if you already know all the commands in Vim for search and replacing, or for looking for things, or for evaluating things, then creating multiple cursors allows you to do all of those things at several different positions in the documents at once. And it does it in a very visual way. So, for example, if you wanted to change, if you wanted to change one word to another word, you normally kind of serially go through changing it, or you can do it globally in Vim. But with multiple cursors, you'll be able to create a cursor at every single edit point and see all of those edit points. All of those things change at the same time, or not, depending on how you may want to type. It's more like an interactive parallel search and replace. I think that's quite exciting. I know that you can do this in Visual Studio Code, and there's another editor that I wasn't able to get to work, which is it's Pulsar, which is actually GitHub's Atom editor, and that has multiple cursor editing as well, and that's definitely worth checking out. I wasn't able to get it to build on here in time for this. They were just some of the ones that I was going to show. I've actually got a huge list of probably 20 or 25 editors that you might want to have a look at. I'll put them with the forum post for this documentation office hours, so that, you know, if you're feeling a bit bored of writing or need to kind of have a different look at the way that you write, try one of them and see how you feel about it. And I think it's a lot of fun. It's one of the things I like about documentation writing, is messing with different editors. With that, I think I'm going to stop the recording, and then if anybody has any questions or wants to share their favorite editor, then please feel free.